with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. Welcome to another episode of Get Wisdom Live. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This week, Creator explores efforts to expand human intuitive reach. So, not everybody, Carl, for sure, not even, a minority, and probably not even a huge minority, but some people would actually like to increase their intuitive reach or become psychic, become clairvoyant, right? Acquire psychic abilities. And we're going to, explore some people and their efforts to do that and see what Creator has to say about it, Carl.
Well, it's something I'm intimately involved with as an intuitive psychic, if you will, and a channeler. I've been working with this for years and years now and studying it avidly also to better understand how it works and how it can be utilized in a way that not only is effective but safe. And so it's a big subject, but there is a lot of interest in it, and a lot of people would love to be able to tune into things and gain special knowledge and kind of the inside secrets about things. And I would say as well, be careful what you wish for, because
Right.
knowledge comes with responsibility and it can be quite a burden. But
Oh, sure.
we really should be intuitive, all of us, and to a very sophisticated and profound degree, and we're not. And that's a problem right there too, because we're not functioning like we're supposed to be as we were designed to do.
Well, you're not the first one to say, careful what you wish for. I had a very good friend who was a psychic years ago, back in the 80s and 90s. And she used to say that her abilities were more of a curse than a blessing, to be honest with you. So, I don't know if she really meant that, but at the end of the day, certainly there's, it's not all roses, that's for sure.
Yeah. And especially when it's difficult to control. And this is one of the difficulties in using your intuition. It's very subtle and it's driven by inner intentions. And if you're an empath, meaning you're highly sensitive to outside energies of all kinds, you can't help yourself
Yes.
trying to taste and smell and breathe in everything around you. And you do. People go in a room full of people and it's like they're assaulted with energy and impressions, and it can be overwhelming. So you can have too much of a good thing is another way of
an
looking
example of that is the same friend I talked about. She went with her husband to go see Gettysburg, the battlefield. And they had pulled into the parking lot, she said, and she had no sooner than opened the door and got out of the car and started looking around that she noticed there was already 4 or 5 ghosts that spotted her and started walking towards her in the parking lot. And
There you
she
go.
immediately turned to her husband and screamed at him, Gary, let's get out of here now. And that was it. Their day trip was over just that fast. So yeah, if you have that capability, that kind of clairvoyance, you may not be able to shut it off. And she was not able to. So interesting. All right, let's get started, Carl. Here we go. So you asked Creator, we have learned from Creator that the interlopers have manipulated us to severely reduce our intuitive reach through genetic alteration, cutting us off from the divine realm. We are also disconnected from a deep level of the mind we call the deep subconscious that is still unknown to science. This has caused us many problems because the deep subconscious can still see the Akashic records of our other lifetimes intuitively and worries constantly about the backlog of unhealed karmic trauma we've been through. But it can't communicate directly with our conscious awareness because of the disconnection. The best it can do is trigger emotions like fear and anxiety as a vague warning. What can Creator tell us about the cost of us having these two deficits? I'm sorry. What can Creator tell us about the cost to us of having these two deficits? Sorry, I had a frog in my throat there, Carl.
All right. This is what Creator says. Combined together, these two deficits are the human dilemma in a nutshell. At least on the human side of things, why you are struggling so, why you're so helpless. so unaware of the broader landscape, the agenda underway of the divine realm, your part in it, and the other players. They are hiding from you behind the scenes. Because of this disconnection, you cannot see it. The intuitive reach is the antidote to secrets because nothing is truly able to be hidden from non local consciousness. If one is adept and has the reach to go looking and find out the details about something. So, being disconnected intuitively is a huge liability. It cuts you off from being able to obtain knowledge effortlessly, as done routinely by light beings. You were light beings before incarnating in your physical existence currently on the planet and have forgotten what that is like. You are living as an animal with meager intuition for the most part, and it is truly isolating you, not only from broad awareness and knowledge of many things, but from more robust divine communication. We can hear you when you call out to us, wanting to talk to God and be heard. That is no problem because we have no defect at our end. So our intuitive reach encompasses everything with exquisite detail, and we can be present everywhere at once, truly, just as the scriptures say about our omnipotence. You, on the other hand, are an extension of our consciousness, but individual portions and not the whole. Moreover, residing within a physical body and depending on its own ways of working to experience your consciousness as a spirit being in essence when there is a defect within the physical body that prevents the intuitive information from reaching your conscious awareness within the mind, as that is dependent on the brain's ability to gather information from the subconscious and the intuitive awareness the upper subconscious is capable of. But unfortunately, that dimming of intuitive reach leaves you without an awareness of many, many things, including the fact you have a deep subconscious cut off from you that is actually the largest part of your own mind. So you are cut off from above, not being able to hear God, and you are cut off from below, not being able to hear your own deeper levels of awareness and knowledge. This has truly made you quite helpless and easily manipulated by the interlopers who have used you as slaves again and again and again, and even doing it in a little more indirect way in today's world by using mind control from behind the scenes, not strutting about with a whip in hand, making you cower and live in chains. You are nonetheless in a slave world. This is an irony larger than life, but unknown to most people on the planet. The deep subconscious worry about your karmic trauma history creates huge inner conflicts. And because it is a conflict waged by the largest part of the mind that also controls the physical body to a great extent, there is an interplay from having a state of recurring stress and the emotional reactions to witnessing the self in trouble in many settings, times, and places without a real understanding of why that is so or what might be done about it. The deep subconscious begins to worry about the bad times coming again, or even in seeing actual ongoing parallels, and perhaps being an underdog in the current life as a match to other lives when you suffered similarly. This is why so many people are on medication for anxiety that seems inexplicable when it is not justifiable by anything in particular gone wrong. Many people exhibit this phenomenon. And so that is largely why it is assumed that anxiety is simply a chemical imbalance in the brain, which might be worsened by adverse environmental circumstances in the current life, but the cause is simply biochemistry gone wrong. We beg to differ. Science is entirely wrong. They have the cart before the horse. The problems come from lives gone wrong to begin with, and then inner worry that will not be quelled by taking pills. It needs deep karmic repair via the divine realm.
Well, that is a fairly emphatic statement, Carl. Science is entirely wrong. Not a little bit wrong, not, somewhat wrong, entirely wrong. So that's about as strong a statement as you're going to get out of Creator.
Yes, indeed. And it's an important topic because we today look to science more and more and not our faith, not the religious teachings we might have grown up with or that it might be dominant in our culture. But it's not true in the West these days, and it's fading. And that is a deliberate encroachment of the forces of evil, frankly,
Yeah.
and it seems benign. Well, it's just a choice. You can choose to have faith or not. You can choose to go to some religious observance or not. And it doesn't seem all that important to many people. But we know that the opposite is true. The opposite is true.
Yes.
It is sealing your fate to go away from divine alignment. And that's what'll happen when you lose that link and that desire.
So we've learned that we've been cut off intuitively because of genetic manipulation. And one of the things we're cut off from is our deep subconscious. So the next question is kind of spawned by my thinking in terms of, well, we're cut off from our deep subconscious, but is our deep subconscious also cut off from us, right? We've turned that question around. So that's the genesis of the next question, so to speak. So here we go. Carl, you asked Creator, can Creator tell us if there's any correlation between the amount of karmic backlog, recorded trauma still resounding in the depths, and what we might call the courage capacity or strength of the individual? Without courage or strength, there would likely be an ongoing desperate effort to avoid having to deal with, endure, and cope with the return of karmic comeuppances. This habitual avoidance of facing one's fears would seem to only worsen dilemma, ultimately, as the individual sacrifices long term growth for short term shelter and safety. Can Creator tell us how much this avoidance of difficulty serves the interloper agenda to reduce our intuitive reach? And in conjunction with what I was saying before this question, the speculation in my head was, is there a way that we can train our deep subconscious, influence our deep subconscious, or communicate in some way with our deep subconscious? And Creator does supply the answer to that, Carl.
Well, let's see. This is what Creator says. This inner corruption in the workings of the deep mind is a kind of bonus for the interlopers and having hobbled you to an even greater extent than intended. That liability helps them keep you in your places, helpless and disempowered. The courage you speak of is not the answer for this disconnect and in the dilemma it brings about. And in fact, courage is more an end product of being in a better balance to begin with. So it presumes some healing has either been applied or the person has not been made to suffer as greatly as others because of inner resilience and inner strength, which can include exhibiting courage as well. But that is more a product of circumstance, the genetic expression of the interdimensional DNA, and the soul attributes that configure the workings of the physical body and its layers that is arranged before birth for the launching of a new incarnation. So, having courage for the majority of people is more realistically a goal to strive for, or an exhibit demonstrating attainment of inner equilibrium and wherewithal, or at least maintaining it if one is born with above average strength and resilience, being able to roll with the punches, so to speak, not take things too much to heart, too personally, to be dragged down and disparaged with long term damage to the psyche. Nor will courage heal you. It has many advantages in many kinds of situations, but it is more a coping mechanism and a maintenance utility than a deep answer for the human dilemma.
Again, we're Creator's really throwing these out in a powerful way. Nor will courage heal you. A lot of people think, and I'm guilty of thinking this, that just straighten up, grit up, get some confidence developed, encourage, inculcate courage within yourself, and you'll heal a lot of your dilemmas. I sincerely believe that for most of my life, Carl. This is a revelation that courage will not heal you. So this is big stuff.
Well, it's exhibited quite frequently, I think, in the way people try to reassure and help others, seemingly help them. You know, these admonitions to soldier on, to
Yeah.
suck it up, and
Yep.
find that wherewithal. Come on, you've got to do this, and no choice really, and you'll get through it, and then it'll all be okay.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I
that
was a
kind of
big
encouragement does, for the short term, help people find more within than they might think. But that doesn't keep them from getting anxious and then being in a state of fear the next time
right.
they've got to take on a challenge.
Yes, because it's not healing that connection and it's not healing the dilemma that's exhibited within the deep subconscious. So that's uh that's something really important to keep in mind. U.S. creator Austrian intuitive Rudolph Steiner reports from his own out of body direct spiritual explorations of the past that in the time of Atlantis, most humans still possessed a kind of dreamy clairvoyance that most people would experience, especially between the state of being fully awake and deep asleep. And that this dreamy clairvoyance meant that people at the time accepted and took for granted the reality of the spirit world, unlike our fully materialistic viewpoint of today, especially among scientists. Nevertheless, the clairvoyance was passive rather than assertive, and the feeling of the I self being in full control of the experience was absent. What can Creator tell us?
All right, these are creator's words. This is a fair description of the state of being in those ancient times. But it is not so different from today's world, where many people have intuitive reveries in the dream state and in the in between level of consciousness between waking and sleeping, but do not realize what they are experiencing is their non local consciousness. We use as a term for intuition because it is more descriptive as an aspect of consciousness. And that's something people would misunderstand, thinking of intuition as having a hunch or a guess. The reality of things is that the genetic manipulation of humans was done way before the time of Atlantis. The modern human, in its current configuration, is only about 120,000 years old. And we have told you that your presence on the earth was discovered fairly soon after you were introduced onto the planet. That had been prepared in advance as a loving nest for you to inhabit. And then along came the Anunnaki extraterrestrials who decided to enslave you, and in the course with finding you unruly, but having some potential for doing useful work, disrupted your genetic endowment to dim you down and dumb you down as well. Hence, the liabilities we are discussing here, that you are cut off from the higher realms through a diminished intuitive reach and cut off from your own deeper awareness of other lifetimes and the knowledge within the deep subconscious, as well as it being the largest part of the mind governing the body. So, floating in your head as your conscious awareness leaves you with relatively little power to even influence your own being very effectively. And then here we are. That has not improved in all this time. It is only the discoveries of your channel which are pointing the way to the need for healing for these deficiencies. And this has led to this being added to the Lightworker Healing Protocol, your channel devised in order to better save and heal humanity through divine intervention.
Okay. Well, we had this discussion before the show that, the dreamy clairvoyance is something we can probably throw out, so to speak, as something as a useful term. Steiner essentially has had it right, Creator says, but it's really no different than it is today. So while he correctly diagnosed the situation, it's not it's not time dependent. So they were just as disconnected back then as we are now. So there's some correction of Steiner's material there for sure.
Well, and the thing that is meaningful to me in having that on record is someone else is seeing with a very keen intuition that he had, this isn't a new problem, that this goes way back, and that is fully congruent with creator's teachings, as we heard in the answer to this question, that This started almost at the very beginning. The Garden of Eden phase was
Right.
blessed in many, many ways, and then it got corrupted, and that's the reason, not because of Eve and her feminine wiles, or it was the extraterrestrials who came, and that's the warning in the Bible. It's about the interlopers, not about an evil part of humanity.
Right. Yep. U.S. creator Steiner went on. Excuse me. Start over. Here we go. U.S. creator Steiner went on to report that at the time Jesus met with John the Baptist, the bulk of humanity no longer possessed even this dreamy clairvoyance. Of course, we learned it just previously in the previous question that wasn't there for Atlantis either, or that was all that was there for Atlantis and hasn't really changed. That the daily life of the average individual was as hardwired to the five physical senses as it ever was, even in comparison to today. Steiner reports that at the time of Christ, the human intuitive reach was perhaps at its lowest ebb, presented a kind of divine crisis for the future of humanity. What can Creator tell us?
Oh, a creator says it is certainly the case that in the time of Christ, things were no better. And this, of course, is highly variable. There are always some who have more intuition than others, but at times when the world is dark, it is because there is greater subjugation and suppression across the board of all human thought and activities. This is done to keep you on a tight leash, so to speak, but through mind control manipulation and sometimes technological means to fog the mind so little happens. That keeps you submissive and easily manipulable, but will hamper your ability to do anything truly useful, and certainly not able to take the initiative for self help and improvement. The era of Jesus Christ was a dark one from many standpoints. Life was quite harsh, and people struggled greatly to eke out an existence, particularly because of the harsh subjugation by ruthless overseers on the part of the ruling bodies manipulated to be that way, heartless, punitive, and cruel in how they went about it.
So, again, an extension of the previous answer that things were certainly no better at the time of Christ than they are today. And, in many ways, life was much harder than back then than it is now. But, at the same time, maybe it seems a little bit easier. Certainly not for everybody in this world today, but, we don't have the kind of totalitarian um, oppression that a lot of people suffered back then in the Middle East at the time of Christ. And that can do a lot to hinder any kind of religious exploration. But today we have our cell phones and our television and our screens with our subconscious programming that can come out of these devices that can help take the place of harsh punitive treatment, I suppose.
Well, some would point out to you that this is true of the Western world, but there's many places on the planet where people live in despair, poverty, and subjugation by their local tyrants, and
Sure.
the lack of advanced technological um adjuncts is making their lives as harsh as the ancient times, with no modern conveniences at all, and often lack of food in the bargain, or in fresh water. So this is something that we've come to lean on, I think, the technology,
Yeah.
but it's kind of a false god because it's fragile, it has a downside, and it's not a substitute for being in divine alignment. It won't save you
Right.
from adversity.
I think it's interesting, though, Carl, that there has been a huge emphasis on getting smartphones into the hands of the bulk of the world's population. And that it just seems to our powers that be, our rulers, that it's more important that somebody have a cell phone than that they have a toilet or running water or even proper sanitation. That they have actual floor in their hut instead of dirt. But no, it's more important that they get a smartphone. So I find that very interesting. But it just seems to go along that ultimately the agenda is a control of our intuitive abilities on top of things. So, U.S. creator, according to Steiner at the time of Christ, did I read? the human intuitive reach could only be realistically revived by initiation into mystery schools or severe and protracted spiritual training, such as undertaken by the monastic branches of the different religions of the world. Meanwhile, indigenous peoples of the world use psychedelic drugs to force awake latent intuitive abilities. Most people born today with limited intuition believe that these paths are still present, and the only realistic means to awaken profound intuitive abilities when one wants to truly expand their intuitive reach. What can Creator tell us?
All right. Creator says all of these paths have something to contribute. But we can tell you that opening the third eye, so to speak, to enhance one's intuition will always be mostly a function of what latent natural ability was present from birth. This varies greatly, and for many reasons. Part of it is the makeup of the individual and what their purpose and life mission will be, and how much having an intuitive reach will matter greatly, or would simply be a useful adjunct, but not a major aspect needed for a successful life and the goals at hand. Intuition is always helpful in many ways, but this is not something that can be called up. And it is only in recent times that a further awakening of intuition capability or intuitive capability has been bestowed by Creator to help more from birth have a greater intuitive reach. This is deliberate and the result of millennia of prayerful requests for help. We have revealed through your channel that you are the saviors. You are the change agents we sent to Earth to solve the problem of evil and save your fellow beings from these interlopers that threaten your existence. As daunting as that sounds, it must be so because problems created within the physical plane need to be handled and resolved through the physical plane. We cannot short circuit this experiment in free will that is underway. We must let it either sink or swim. And that is what is uncertain at the moment, whether humanity in its current configuration will even survive as a species or become extinct. That does not mean the death of your souls. You will be in the light, if not here, or perhaps trapped in the lower astral plane if you cannot transition back to the light successfully. This too, your channel is working to change in the makeup of things through devising ways to request effective spirit rescue of those failing to transition fully. But that is still human level business and a struggle you are taking part in, like it or not, aware of it or not. You knew this before you came down. And the problem of unawareness is a consequence of this disconnection intuitively to appreciate your past and the heritage it represents. Your deep subconscious knows you have been alive before because it can see the Akashic records. Not that it has a perfect understanding. It also is not very good at analytical thinking and will not be able to devise a creative solution to help you heal yourself. It is also not truly aware of the divine realm and your place in things, that you can reach out for help and get assistance from the divine. So here we are, back to the consequences of what has been done to you and why it is time to ramp up the healing effort to resolve this problem.
You know, another big, really revelation in this particular channeling, Carl. The statement from Creator that the intuition capacity that you have is really what you're born with. You know, it's mostly a function of what latent natural ability was present from birth. Those are Creator's words. And that's news to me, you know, because there is this idea
Yeah.
that you can enter a mystery school or undertake spiritual training and that you can, you know, kind of force awake these intuitive abilities, you know, the same way that you can go choose to jump off a cliff and Creator is not going to stop you if you choose that. There's this question mark that's been burning for me anyway about whether there's some way that I could force open intuitive abilities without Creator's assistance, you know, with just
Well,
being able to do it on my own. And the answer
right.
we're getting here is not very easy.
Yes. And you notice Creator does not recommend one of these adjuncts,
Right.
try LSD, use
Yeah.
ayahuasca, use semi starvation and deprivation, go in an underground chamber with no outside stimulation and this sort of thing.
Right.
And that's for a reason. And Creator is saying that this is something that has been heavily suppressed. So good luck. You
Right.
need healing really to awaken that. So that's the first thing. But I would say I don't want to create the impression that we're saying everyone out there wanting to help develop your intuition is a charlatan. I think what those things do is point out to people you might have intuition, and a lot of people have inklings because they get intuitive flashes of things and are not sure because we've
Right.
been programmed to disbelieve. And so what these teachings do is help people find out who they are, so that natural ability
Right.
can be reawakened, and then practice it and experiment with it and help to bolster it.
Yeah.
So this is one does not exclude the other. Just the fact that you have what you're born with doesn't mean you're fully maturely using it. Just like
Oh,
with
sure.
the ability to learn and grow and be an intellectual, that doesn't happen as an infant. You have to put some work in to learn how to use your mind.
Sure. Of course. But I see where I can see a parallel of what Creator's saying in my own experience, my own research over the years. It does seem that the people that write books on how to be psychic are themselves naturally psychic, and it came fairly easily to them. And so they just kind of assume that if people just follow in my footsteps, they'll have the same level of success. And I can tell them point blank that that's not true because I tried some of this stuff and it didn't come easy at all. But for
Yeah.
them, that they're just writing down their own experience, and so they're not charlatans. They were completely sincere and honest, but they may not have had a complete grasp of the totality of the dilemma facing individuals in particular. So it's definitely powerful insight here, Carl. All
Well,
right, you ask
and this
Creator.
is something.
Oh,
Go
go ahead.
ahead. That's all
Go
right.
ahead. Oh, you want to go to the next question? Okay. That's what
Just
I was
go
going to
ahead.
use.
That's
Okay,
fine.
great. U.S. Creator, according to Steiner, as a result of his out-of-body examination of John the Baptist and his mission, he discovered that baptism at the time truly was, in fact, kind of induced drowning. Practitioners such as John the Baptist would hold the seeker of baptism underwater until their consciousness either left the body or was loosened from the body, but before death could occur. This was a way to jumpstart the was this a way to jumpstart the inculcation of more profound intuitive abilities? What can Creator tell us?
All right. Creator says this is a partial misunderstanding of John the Baptist's intentions. What he was doing was not trying to shock the system to make it come alive in a way to restore intuition. It was to truly present a test of faith that one must be ready for. That is why he held the people underwater, to allow them to put themselves to the test. Did they have the faith that this would result in a transformation for them or not? If they panicked and struggled and fought, this was a sign of their lack of readiness to fully embrace the divine. So, this was easily misconstrued as an attempt to become more insightful and intuitively aware, but that was not truly what was happening. It was the experiencing of a challenge to the physical being when wanting to truly reach beyond the self and embrace the divine and put one's trust in divine support. So, this was a kind of strategy, a device to create a signal event in a person's life as a point of demarcation between the past, as a kind of student still in the learning and acquisition phase, and then graduating to a higher level of understanding and a demonstration of inner strength and a state of greater completion. And not only undergoing the dunking, but drawing great meaning from it, being ready to be literally transformed, starting out as a mere human and ending up in the arms of the divine with heart and soul. So it was at once a symbolic gesture with a physical corollary for reinforcement. In this way, it was a clever device to assist people in making a firm commitment to their spiritual journey, their allegiance to the divine and divine principles, and to become, in essence, fully qualified as a follower of the divine. A rite of passage.
A rite of passage. People might look at that and think it's contrived, and maybe a tad dishonest because it's contrived. But rite of passages are very important in our lives, Carl. I mean, marriage is a rite of passage. Graduation is a rite of passage. We have ceremonies for those. There's all kinds of rites of passage in life, and they're very important. I don't think anybody would dispute that.
Yes, and ritual is an important feature of how one governs your thinking. At some point, you have to break out of preconceived notions that are holding you back. And if you're not able to do that, you'll never advance. So sometimes you do have to be kind of pulled up by the lapels and given a shake, and someone to challenge your complacency, your doubt, and really force you to think more deeply. And sometimes that can lead to a breakthrough. It's easier than getting hit on the head. And there are stories
Right.
like that out there. I fell off a ladder and was unconscious for 4 days, and I woke up and I was psychic, and all these mystical spiritual things were happening and so on. Well, that there are other ways to have a shift in thinking, but I don't recommend that. Don't go get a big
Well,
hit on the head.
we did a show on sudden psychic abilities, Carl, a long time ago, and Creator had said that a lot of times the divine realm will take the opportunity of an accident to do an upgrade, but that's something that's going on for that particular individual. Not everybody who falls off a ladder and hits their head is going to wake up with psychic abilities.
Right. Exactly.
So and there's no control mechanism. You can't force psychic abilities by walking up a ladder and falling off and hitting your head on purpose. I mean, that's not going to do it. It's a divine upgrade with it and getting hit by lightning, right? There's individuals out there that got struck by lightning and were ended up with psychic ability. Same thing. Creator said emphatically that this was an opportunity that the divine realm took to do an upgrade, a purposeful upgrade at that time.
Well, the divine works through our life experience to start to gate things in at an opportune moment. It's a window of opportunity when someone is kind of making a break with the past, maybe forced on them through adversity or an accidental injury of some kind. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's jumpstart this person back into more in alignment with their life mission, say. And maybe they need
Sure.
intuitive ability to do that effectively.
Right. And it also works probably within the rules of engagement because you still have to respect the non-believers out there and give them an out, so to speak, right?
Yes.
So, if everybody could just figure out how to turn on psychic abilities whenever they wanted to, this would be a very different world. It wouldn't be the world we're in right now. So when you introduce and have somebody suddenly be psychic when they weren't psychic before, it's helpful if there's some big event or some big transition or quote unquote rite of passage that can allow a non-believer to kind of, choose that explanation and not have their worldview forced into a change. So that's part of the rules of engagement.
Well, the other thing is, just to add one more variable in the picture, if I had a nickel for every time someone had something wonderful or profound happen to them, simply because someone else said a prayer for them, I'd be a very happy person. I'd be like Scrooge McDuck, diving into his room full of nickels or whatever it was in the comic books of old. But this is another factor. The divine's always there, and we can call on it, and many do.
Yes.
And they're uncertain what's the end result. Oftentimes, that's because it's subtle and sometimes doesn't play out for a long period of time. It isn't an instant gratification you get. So anyway, that's just another aspect.
It may not even play out in the current life. So
yeah,
there you go. Unfortunately. All right, you asked Creator. Steiner saw his mission as twofold: to share his findings from his own extensive spiritual explorations, as well as to try and clone himself and teach others exactly how to develop their intuitive reach to the extent he possessed and exercised. His assumption was that the only way to overcome the profound materialism taking over society was to counter it with a literal army of mystics and seers whose findings would oppose and eventually neutralize and discredit this materialism. kind of harkens back to what I said in the comments just before this question of, if everybody could just find the switch to throw and become psychic, the world would be different. And in a sense, Steiner was actually trying to create that, trying to find that switch and be able to activate it. Did this agenda have divine support at the time? And what can Creator tell us?
All right, Creator says, we support every endeavor that has a noble purpose, that is to say, a high spiritual nature and value in advancing greater awareness and connection and alignment with the divine in our agenda. So, greater knowledge, becoming more adept in thinking more deeply about things, seeking deeper truths, wanting to connect the dots to better understand the world, one's place in it personally, and the uncertainties about having a relationship directly with the divine are plenty of challenge for anyone. There are many paths one can take to gain knowledge, awareness, and work on their enlightenment, which is a healing journey, after all, to bring you back into full alignment with us energetically. You do not start out that way at birth, and that is a defect in the system for reasons we are discussing. The quest for humans to make sense of things and the curiosity left in the wake of this disconnection of not knowing who you are, why you are here, where you come from, or where you're going has plagued humanity all through time on the planet. You know all these things as a light being. The problem is here because of the corruption by evil to diminish physical humans. Steiner was after a greater expansion of awareness, and that would be a good thing. He was doing it the hard way, as it turns out, because it is not truly in the cards to awaken everyone intuitively, so all can be seers of great power and reach. Those abilities are present in a modest percent of individuals. Everyone has the potential for some intuitive awareness, but many close that off and become refractory to any attempt to reawaken it. Those in between have some sensing, some hunches about things, and some knowings of things that turn out to be correct because they are seeing it intuitively, but not perceiving that as what is happening. That is helpful always, but cultivating greater such ability in the masses is as big a process as healing your karmic trauma in order to be happier, because the deepest and most long lasting traumas are the more difficult to contend with. It is not even a high priority of Creator to make that happen because there is not sufficient time left on the clock to give that a priority and bring it about. At this point, you need to, in effect, dodge a bullet that is coming. And that is the annihilation plans of the interlopers that could even be launched within the next 2 years. Enough healing to allow people to be ready for ascension and graduate to a higher plane of existence, which is Creator's plan, cannot be carried out in that short a time. So we are working on ways to change the direction of things to give you a breather and allow more human launched healing requests to prepare you to leave physical existence altogether. That is to your advantage, so you will never again be under the control and subjugation of physical extraterrestrials or the dark spirits within your galaxy who started the problem of evil in the first place through corrupting other beings in the physical, including all of the physical extraterrestrials, and now you as recent arrivals.
All of these answers have just are very, very powerful. Well, again, Creator saying Steiner was after a great expansion of awareness, and that would be a good thing, but he was doing it the hard way. And that healing humanity's backlog of trauma is probably as great a challenge as what Steiner was attempting. So I admire Steiner tremendously, but at the same time, I'm humbled by how great a task he was taking on, and it really wasn't something he could realistically expect to achieve.
Well, he was living in a higher and better way than the average person because of his gifts.
Mhm.
So he had that bias that if it's good for him, it's good for everyone. And that's true, with, variable, perhaps exceptions. But the problem is we don't have the luxury of making that happen right now. If we had another
Right.
1,000 years, we can, I'm sure, do that, change the makeup of the incoming humans, and through a kind of natural attrition and upgrading by creator, when there's no headwind, when no one is here to reintroduce the corrupt manipulations, we can get out of this. So we have to do enough healing to escape the grip of these interlopers, and then we'll be able to grow, and we'll have done enough healing that will continue as a healing energy.
Yeah. And I like the way that you use the word bias, that he had a particular bias because of his abilities, and probably didn't appreciate how truly difficult. I mean, he knew it was difficult, don't get me wrong. But I don't think he probably appreciated how immensely difficult it actually was, to the point of not being a realistic goal that's achievable. But I certainly admire his attempt anyway. U.S. creator, it seems that at some point the interlopers got wind of what Steiner was up to, and as a result, that last decade of his life was a very, very difficult one. Hitler himself was personally opposed to Steiner and considered him a great enemy. What can creator tell us?
Creator says he was noticed by the extraterrestrials and then subjected to much harassment and manipulation in an attempt to constrain him and sideline his efforts. But this is nothing at all unusual. They do this to everyone who has psychic ability, because they see you reaching out to the cosmos with your third eye, sending that intuitive beam out to explore. It is always noticed by the extraterrestrial psychics, and they will follow up to see you as exploring things and what they are up to, because you're not supposed to be doing that. And that was the purpose of the long ago genetic corruption, to keep you from doing it. Here again is that irony that people considered one of the weirdest fringe groups on the planet, the psychics, are the most feared by advanced extraterrestrial beings who enslave the world. They themselves are telepathic. They know what advantages it holds for being able to sense what others are thinking and even manipulate their thinking, but they are blind to the reality of the divine. So their reach has a built-in blind spot they allowed to develop. And when they became corrupted by dark spirit possession, were not aware of the mechanism, could not see it, and have become quite diminished in terms of their character and morality. They are loveless psychopaths. That is the end result of atheism, because love comes from the divine. And in the absence of love, there is nothing but the ego and ultimately savagery to serve its appetites. So there is an endless series of individuals you have cataloged with many stories of people finding out things, the so-called conspiracy theorists, who, because of their intuition, sense something wrong and want to look into it, as truly scholars do. That is a pejorative term intended to further complete the silencing by making people disregard the whistleblowers, the seers, who know there is danger afoot and want to warn the world. So it serves the interlopers to have them sidelined. And this has been an ongoing campaign throughout human history and was not unique to Steiner as an individual.
So this is interesting. Steiner was very psychic and knew that there wasn't enough psychics around to really change the common perception, right? And so his goal was to try to increase the number of psychics, right? If we could get a mass transition of human beings so that there was more psychics around, the credibility of psychics in general would go up, and then it could change things, right? But another thing that Steiner didn't realize was that, assuming that he could succeed and actually, create a cascade of new psychics being born, he didn't appreciate the fact that there's these interlopers out there, that are tuned in and looking for new psychics, that are breaking out and trying to probe around in the dark and see what's going on, and then say hello and grab onto them and subjugate them, keep them down. So, it's mind blowing when you think, put yourself in his shoes, what he's attempting to do, but also what he was up against.
Indeed.
U.S. creator Steiner talked about brotherhoods of the left, or evil brotherhoods, that were the great problem of his time. Was he sensing the combined participation of select humans with the overarching control of the extraterrestrial alliance, especially Anunnaki psychics, without full appreciation that it was truly a galactic empire of physical aliens that constituted this, quote, great and evil power, unquote, he frequently confronted in his spiritual explorations. What can Creator tell us?
Well, Creator says this was in actuality a blind spot of Steiner's seeing the presence of evil and connecting it to beings in a higher plane of existence, but was only seeing the dark spirits in the lower astral plane and was reading their energy correctly, that they are malevolent and quite savage beings. But he did not realize that there were dark extraterrestrial lost soul spirits intermixing and actually controlling the dark fallen angelic spirit meddlers that are abundant in the lower astral plane. They are the source of evil because the spirit meddlers were the first to fall from grace and lose their standing and place in heaven, so to speak, by choosing the temptation to serve the ego more and more, and were unable to recover their former lofty status when they became self corrupted in their thinking. That is a cautionary tale for everyone and what can happen in neglecting spiritual development and perspective about what is truly most important. So he was unaware of the extraterrestrials per se. And that is simply because the idea did not occur to him that it was possible. This is a closely guarded secret of the extraterrestrials themselves. They don't want you to know this and have worked avidly to program the minds of everyone that advanced extraterrestrial life is only a theoretical possibility and perhaps an unlikely one. And in any event, the Earth is a tiny planet in a tiny solar system on the edge of a galaxy and so far from the nearest star, being visited by other sentient beings would be impossible. That is all untrue, of course, but this is what science says because the extraterrestrials want science to tell you that. So this is not a fault of Steiner's, but simply that he was working within the culture of the day. And so there were many things carved in stone within the beliefs of everyone, as happens today as well. This is why creative thinkers are few and far between, because it is not a question of becoming better at being a human, but actually recovering from severe deprivations to limit ability to think beyond the conventional.
So we can't blame Steiner for this one. The if you can imagine, that most people today don't believe in extraterrestrials. Imagine when Steiner was an adult. Steiner was an adult for most of his life before air travel became a reality. The Wright brothers didn't even have their first flight until Steiner was 50s. you know so if we weren't even flying at that time, how can people possibly imagine extraterrestrials and traveling the galaxy with technology? It's too much. It's too much of a leap for someone to make, even someone as gifted as Steiner.
Yeah, and here again, I mean, this addresses the basic dilemma that having intuitive reach means only that. You only go looking for what you want to see or expect might be visible
Yes.
because it's all driven by intention. It will not show you things you have no clues about unless you have at least a kind of open-minded question that what else is there? What else could I learn? What other kinds of beings might there be? This sort of thing. That's why this is a struggle for everyone to
and
figure things out. You
and,
don't get
and
it handed to you.
yeah, and what you are saying is of critical importance, Carl, because people think that if you're psychic, that you should be able to see this stuff. Well, Steiner should be able to see the extraterrestrials or these extraterrestrial dark soul spirits or whatever is out there, right? But that's not how intuition works. And Steiner himself said the same thing you were echoing there, Carl, saying the
Yeah.
exact same
Well,
thing, that intuition works in terms of what you go looking for. And if you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it, which is unlike being down here in the physical world, right? Which, well, actually has some truth to it, because if you're not paying attention, things can go by where somebody else sees it and you don't. But nevertheless, here is a possibility of seeing things that you have no explanation for. But
well,
according
let
to
me give.
Steiner, intuitively, that's not the same thing, right? Go ahead.
That's right. It, let me give some credit to Steiner here because I would say that probably the majority of psychics today don't believe in dark spirits.
Right.
They don't believe in evil, some of them.
They don't go looking for
Other
them.
than that it's human nature that we can have an evil streak, and there are some people in whom that's prominent. But all this is just human concoctions and human fantasy and dark thinking and dark thoughts. That there aren't actually dark spirits that are a separate being out there in huge numbers, that sort of thing, because they don't see it.
Right.
And that's the reason they're not looking, they're not open to the idea. So it can't be shown to them
Right.
because it only will allow in what you allow in through your beliefs. So there's a built-in filter always in
Yeah.
psychic work.
And that is a revelation to people that don't fancy themselves psychic, because I can tell you point blank, people think differently in terms of what psychics should and should not be able to see. And that's part of the credibility problem. It's like, well, they can't be psychic. They would have seen that. No, there's another explanation. It's a profound one.
Yes.
You ask creator, as ambitious as Steiner's agenda was, viewed from another angle, it might be regarded as a hopeless folly, especially when we consider that the extraterrestrial alliance's decision to annihilate humanity ramped up shortly after his death. Did Steiner's goals and activities of other intuitives in any way contribute to the interlopers' decision to annihilate humanity? Can Creator share with us how Get Wisdom itself might be a divine response to the limited success and aftermath of Steiner's mission life, and how empowered prayer and the Lightworker healing protocol are now the means to saving humanity and not necessarily the widespread development of profound intuitive reach?
Well, here we go. This is Creator's answer. Steiner was one of many intuitives who have imparted their thoughts and perceptions again and again, all along the way, and each helps to reinforce the others, to keep interest alive in what they are doing, and keep open the possibility that there is something to this paranormal capability that could even have some value. The interlopers know this full well and want to squelch it. That should tell you something, that they fear you possessing it. But this is not the chief goal of the interlopers, to simply diminish your intuitive reach. They're simply tired of you altogether. It is like herding kittens. You are unruly, too independent minded, despite all of the subjugation through prior history. This is the nature of who you are, after all. And even without intuitive awareness, you have other soul attributes: wanting to be independent, wanting to be the captain of your own ship, to determine your own destiny and how you could conduct your own life journey. In other words, you want freedom and liberty above all else. This is deeply ingrained because it is divine to think and feel this way. And that is your heritage, whether you know this intuitively or are only hearing it today. We created who you are to begin with. So we understand you and we see the parts of you that are shining forth and the parts of you that are impaired or silent through neglect or unawareness. It is there to be utilized if awakened and brought to bear in helping your life in some way. The point of existence as a general theme for all of humanity is to better your lot and that of your brethren and beyond you as humans, to save the many other beings in existence before your creation who are in an end stage of degradation and inner corruption of such severity, they are hanging by a thread, and only you can save them. This is a test of our paradigm. Can the workings of evil be reined in, and those corrupted saved from ultimately being no more? That is the end fate from divine disconnection, that ultimately you will become purposeless and more a threat to others with purpose. The ultimate death is a soul recycling by which you are turned back into raw energy for the universe, but your soul will be no more. There are millions and millions of beings in danger of this happening. This is true of the dark spirits as well. They too are cut off from divine support altogether and only live as parasites. That cannot continue, especially if more and more physical species become extinct through the reckless savagery of the more powerful among you, the extraterrestrials, wanting to dominate and subjugate and enslave worlds. They can only play that game for so long, and they too will perish. There is time for you to save them if you get going. You have been shown the way and given the tools, both empowered prayer and for those more in earnest, to do healing requests of a more profound and detailed nature through the Lightworker Healing Protocol, a comprehensive series of informed high level prayer requests to attend to every possible kind of negativity that can befall a being and set it right through specifying the divine healing tools up to the task. So everything is in place. What the problems are, what the divine strategies need to be brought to bear, and what the desired outcomes might be to best deal with the dilemma. This is a new undertaking in a new way, and the only way things can succeed. Everything else is a holding action at best, symptomatic alleviation that will not heal the deep causal influences, the deep karmic trauma. Those are the watershed events that got this evil going, and its corruption is taking everything down with it. It is collapsing of its own weight. The divine hand to turn things around must come through you as our representatives, so requests are coming from the human side energetically. According to our own rules, that level of awareness and awakening has to happen for you to take action that will be effective. Only once you do that in enough numbers, working together in common cause, will there be enough human intention for us to launch a massive enough healing intervention to turn things around, especially at this late date. This is simply how things have transpired. It has been extremely difficult as well as time consuming, with many setbacks along the way and many long periods with lack of progress altogether. And this is because the aliens wanted it that way and had the upper hand. You are breaking out. Enough of you are awake in seeing the problem and have the wherewithal and belief in the divine to work a miracle through bringing us to bear in ways never before possible, with greater power, focus, and likelihood of success in liberating you from the burden you labor under currently. You must choose to do what will save you. This can be done safely in the privacy of your own mind. It could hardly be easier. The reason it is not simple is many of you are in doubt and may well need some significant healing within yourselves to warm up to the idea and embrace it to take action. We hope that comes in time. So there is much for you to ponder, and the ball is in your court. We are looking forward eagerly to see what you do.
So I think the big takeaway from this entire show, Carl, is that we've learned that you do not have to be psychic. You don't have to be a seer, and you don't have to have your abilities, Carl, in order to make a change that can save humanity. It's all about harnessing your intention. And that's not the same thing as clairvoyance, right? It's simply saying a prayer. And it couldn't be easier. Creator said it couldn't be easier, Carl.
You don't have to be psychic to use empowered prayer, as we teach, and the Lightworker Healing Protocol. You don't need psychic ability to do it. You can do it with psychic feedback if you're capable of doing it, and we support that also. But this is not a test and something beyond your reach.
No, definitely not. And we've learned that the psychic abilities that you're likely to have are really pretty much established at birth, and so it's not rational. It's not rational to expect for you to be able to do more than you can do. And we've learned emphatically it's just not required for this mission, for everybody to be able to see a response in terms of when they do prayer work. You can stick it out there. You just have to have faith. Faith is not the same thing as psychic ability. It's just having confidence that what you're doing is going to make a difference. That's all that's necessary. And it's really not that hard. But if you don't have the faith, it could be a challenge. But there's ways to inculcate that. You can say prayers to increase your faith, Carl.
Well, tell our listeners where they can get this information.
Well, you can get it at getwisdom.com/LHP to download our ebook that tell you all about the Lightworker Healing Protocol. how you can become a practitioner, or how you can hire a practitioner to do the Lightworker healing protocol for you or loved ones and bring these benefits into your life in an even more direct and easy fashion. So, because then you're not even doing it yourself, right? So, there's a lot of things that you can do to enhance your life as well as help humanity, and you can get started on that today. GetWisdom.com/LHP and get our prayer book while you're at it. GetWisdom.com/prayer. GetWisdom.com/prayer. That's all we have for this week's Get Wisdom. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Be well.